I want to welcome Floyd, Shad, Meshad today, otherwise known as Shad. And it is hard to even know where to begin with Shad. He is a ball of energy that never stops. He has done so much good in this world for our veterans. And it is an incredible honor to have you here, Shad. So I want to thank you so much for coming on, having this discussion today, and being one of our 29 authors on our book, our Labor of Love project, Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. And our whole collaborative goal for this book is to reach our protectors who are suffering in silence. And the authors that we have in this book have hit some pretty extreme lows. But they also have learned how to navigate to resilience, to a thriving life. And so now we have Shad and Meshad on today. Shad, thank you so much for being on. And can you give us a little background, like, your family just right before you entered the military? Can you tell us a little bit about that, where you came from?
I came from a mixed, wonderful Catholic family. My father was French Lebanese. My mother was Scotch Irish. I was raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Went to a Catholic high school. There was only two in the whole state of Alabama in the 40s and 50s. And from there, I was considering the priesthood, went into the Jesuit Society for a year and left, went into ROTC because I was now in the early 60s. The war had started, and I was committed to be a part of what we used to call patriotism, serve your country. So I've had an incredible life. I'm an author on my year in Vietnam, and I'm getting ready in the next 2 years to finish my second book. The first one was called Captain for Dark Mornings. The second book is about my 53 years, at least maybe it'll be 55 by the time I finish it, of what happened to me after Vietnam and that whole journey, which is still going on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Tell me, so I'm very curious. You go to the ROTC after thinking that you were going to be a priest, so that's fascinating in itself. So you're going forward. What was your perspective at the time you were wanting to be patriotic? So you go to ROTC, you get ready. What did you go into the war as? What was your title?
Well, I didn't know anything other than, my dad's brother and my uncle all served in World War II. So, obviously it was just, it was my turn. I didn't think about it. I know that the Vietnam War was revving up. I was in college from 62 to 66. So that period, everything changed by 66. It was full on, 500,000 soldiers in there. I went through ROTC not knowing. I got commissioned in 66, second lieutenant infantry, went to 82nd Airborne, and I was one of the 3% in my class that got a deferment because I got a fellowship to grad school. It's just what I always call a God shot. Second lieutenants in the field in Vietnam, the lifespan was 60 seconds. I probably wouldn't be here today if I didn't get that blessing. And then I went on to grad school and got a degree in psychiatric social work and ran out of the 36 months I was given a blessing for grad school. And I get a letter from the Army, DOD, saying, we're starting mental health units in the war zone, and we'd like you to consider transferring into the Medical Service Corps. And wow, what a blessing. I'll be able to, supposedly do what I've been trained to do, be a mental health person. So I got moved into Medical Service Corps. I went from a second lieutenant to an 03 captain on paper. I'd only done basic training in, the 82nd, and then over 2 years of grad school, and here I am going on active duty the first day as a U.S. Army Captain Medical Service Corps officer. The story's incredible. I mean, you couldn't write this as far as being blessed or lucky or whatever, but my first assignment after I went through medical training at Fort Sam Houston with psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists. It's basically a medic course. All of a sudden you're becoming an officer medic, but they had really no training for psychiatry or counseling in a war zone. This was the first, probably an experiment, and I was one of the first to ever go into a combat zone as a green medical service officer, mental health officer, the shrink they called us.
Yeah.
And my first year, I worked at Leavenworth Military Prison with 10,000 prisoners at Fort Leavenworth Military Prison, Navy and Army prisoners, and about 3,000 of the 10,000 were in there for marijuana busts, serving 3 years. But in the basement of the prison where they kept the incorrigibles is where I learned about Vietnam, and that's where mostly the Vietnam vets that had acted out and done all kinds of crimes were kept down there. And I volunteered to run a rap group down there. And to make a story short, I learned about Vietnam through them. I really had no expectations to go into Vietnam. And that was a real eye-opener. And without getting into any details, I switched with an officer because I only had another year to go active duty because of my contract. I volunteered to take his place to go to Vietnam because probably the team thought I was crazy, but I just felt like, here's the biggest event in my lifetime. And all I've been in school, grad school, you read the papers then, nothing like today. And I felt like, I need to know what's going on. The only way is to go. And by the time I was in 68, 69, the war turned into more of doves rather than hawks. The peace movement had started. Everybody was protesting the war. And, I'm as naive as anybody. I just wanted to know for myself. And my uncle and father, they had served in World War II. And so I volunteered and got on the manifest. And sure enough, I didn't tell my family or anything that. I was, they probably thought I had lost my mind. But 1st of January 70, I headed over to Vietnam to serve my year.
What was it like for you then? Like hearing, so you hear what was going on when you were at the prison, and you get on the plane and you're about to go find out for yourself what this war was all about. With your job, what did you discover just in the mental health itself being over there with the troops? What was that like for you, and what were you seeing with the mental health part?
You'd have to read the book. I wrote a whole book about that year, but basically we had no idea. We had no guidelines or whatever what to do. I mean, we would see people, and you got to remember, these are 17, 18, 19-year-olds that fight the war. Everybody sees, I don't know what they believe that war fighters are, but particularly in our war, they were all teenagers. And here I was, an old man considered. I went through grad school, then I got deferred for reassignment, and then, I didn't even have to go to Vietnam, and I'm laying there, and I'm looking at, by that time, the poor leadership. It was helter-skelter. And it wasn't like doing mental health counseling like today or whatever. You're flying into fire bases. You're going into hospitals where there are race riots. There's all kinds of drugs and alcohol going on because the war was not going anywhere at that time. The leadership was terrible. And 18, 19-year-olds, they could hardly figure anything out. And they were out there giving up their lives and fighting, It was just totally insanity. It was a catch-22 for everybody. And I learned how to manipulate as best I could. We were very small. There's 15 of us for 500,000 human beings. 500,000 warfighters. and supporters and everything. And it was in a way it was a joke, but the people that we got to, we tried their best to get them out of catastrophic events, catastrophic or traumatic stress events. We'd be here all day going through that, but it changed my life. In fact, being in Catholic schools for 16 years, I lost God completely in the first 2 months there, given what I experienced and what I saw. And that's how traumatizing it was for me. This young Southern Catholic kid, ex-seminarian, graduate person going in there without any guidelines and walking into, it was like an ambush, a mental ambush of how do you help this soldier that's been watched his unit get killed and him nearly killed, and his commander wanted to send him back in, so they can get medals and ribbons. It was a war with no goals other than to, of course, they say to stop the Red Arrow or to stop communism or whatever. But later, 20, 30 years later, you realize that Ho Chi Minh was actually a friend during World War II in Korea with America. And but the word communism or whatever, I don't want to get political, but all of a sudden they were the bad guys. And 17 and 18-year-olds are trained, sophisticated weapons and everything to kill and destroy these people. And we killed 1.5 million civilians to kill whatever we killed with the fighting troops. And they were really good guerrilla warfare. We weren't even that sophisticated in guerrilla warfare. It's like, World War II vets going into a triple canopy jungle trying to fight when you couldn't see, 10 feet in front of you. So there were all this contradictions and confusion for anybody, including me. I mean, I was 25 years old. I couldn't figure anything out. I was constantly flying in and out, and then one day I get shot down with 9 clients on a plane, and I'm lucky to be here. 2 or 3 of us lived through it. So it was a whole compression of life and man's inhumanity to man, and kill or be killed, and all that craziness. And I survived it. And I said, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to try to do something for these teenagers. Basically, we're high school graduates, the majority of them. And the officers, they may have been college graduates, but, war's a very complicated and cruel institution.
It's just, it's mind-boggling hearing you talk and be reminded that it is teenagers that were being sent out and were following directions. And of course had no idea in all this complicated, I mean, like you said, the war, it's just so complicated in every way. But it was these teenagers being sent out. And even if you were an old man at 25, that even gives more perspective of how young, the people were that were in that war. So I'm imagining, of course, is the moral injury. I mean, just the depth of everything psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, physically that you all had to go through. And then, so let's fast forward then to the time in the airport. You come back and you're a captain and you're surrounded by, enlisted. Tell me what that was like for you.
I'll tell you real quick. Well, first of all, I didn't even, it was the Christmas drop by Nixon. It took me a week to get out of Vietnam, even with the Christmas drop. So I land in Christmas Eve in the Travis Air Force Base, and they truck us down to Oakland Army Base to process out before Christmas Eve the next day. And there's about 300 Berkeley students throwing Molotov cocktails at our bus and screaming, and baby killers, dope addicts, or whatever. That was my homecoming. We barely got through the gate, and then you spend all night processing, going through whether you have disease or this or that or whatever. I mean, you're like a prisoner going into jail, and where's the? Well, first of all, you're already messed up. What you've experienced, what I was talking about. and you at least wanted an embrace or whatever, and we're seeing the youth come after us like we were the bad guys. We go in, didn't have a flight out. I mean, I didn't know when I was going to get out of Vietnam, if I was, and here I am trying to. Luckily, I had a friend in San Francisco that called and luckily found a reservation for me to get out Christmas Eve the next day. But all night I'm processing out with all of us, officers, enlisted or whatever. It was total insanity. And luckily my friend early Christmas Eve morning took me to the San Francisco airport. And that's where this event, this situation occurred. I walk in, there's 2,500 GIs in their Bush uniforms on the floors because they gave us a Christmas drop, but the ones that landed in airports didn't have any reservations. You can't go home. Some had been there a week with their Christmas drop. And all of a sudden, these two black troops come up. They see me. They see my caduceus. They see I'm an officer. And they scream, sir, they won't let us on the plane. We've been here a week. They say we're inebriated or whatever. I said, who? They take me over to the counter. There's this pretty blonde woman that's turning them all down and not fitting them in to get home. It's Christmas Eve. And I flipped out. I got up on the counter. I don't even want to talk about it. Just shouted down on her, so how dare you? These men have been fighting so you could sit here and have a job. And they're sitting here on Christmas Eve, and they fought a war. You have no idea what they've been through. You know, I've been with them a year. I played like I'd served with them, but I had in a way. And eventually the airport police, everybody came. They pulled me off the top of the counter. They dragged the girl away. They take me up there, realize I'm an officer. And one of the guys who was a veteran, one of the officers or whatever, I go to the airport manager and he understands me. And he gets them on planes, apologizes. I was probably going to be arrested and spend Christmas in jail in San Francisco because I just didn't even think about it. You don't do this to my troops. You don't do this to these young men. Inebriated? What are you talking about, inebriated? And they pulled a flight attendant off, escorted me all the way home on a plane through Dallas into Birmingham. And when I landed, and at that time, Birmingham Airport was about as small as, well, maybe Hawthorne Airport. And it was a small airport compared to airports today. And there was nobody there. I didn't even know. I'm in numb. I'm on morphine extract. I'm drinking just to be calm. And I go down to get my bags. There's nobody on Christmas Eve there. It's just dead. And I walk into one of these old wooden phone booths, and I'm trying to figure out how do I call to see where my family is or anybody. I didn't even have money. And this black lady cleaning the floors came up, and she said, here's a dime. She put it in for me. I called, and that's how my first few hours were. And my mother passed out when they answered, and they sent one of my brother-in-laws there to pick me up. And that was my coming home.
You know, Shad, I just cannot imagine.
I think they still call me the madman, but you know,
the madman.
I was in the middle of it. I know you don't treat these guys like that.
It's, you know, I'm putting.
That's what happened.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing. You know what this brings up in me too is just the thought too that of this woman in the airport, and this is more in the book too in your story. I know there are so many details to your story, but it's the fact of how detached we are as civilians. Like if we are going to send people off to war, teenagers, you know, young people, anybody to war. But we're, again, remembering that these were teenagers that don't know much. They're following directions. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then they get treated on the backside really horribly. And that is because we as civilians are very detached from the cost of war. I'm finding this out more and more as I'm connecting with our protectors, is how detached we are to the cost of war. And so she was judging all this stuff with having no understanding of what just happened. And I want to, I could talk to you forever, Shad. Let's move forward to, it is incredible. You talk about that rage. It is incredible what you did with that rage. Like that madman did so much
Well,
good and are doing so much good in this world with the books that you are writing, you doing so much with the homeless. I mean, how do you even count all the homeless veterans in Los Angeles? Can you share more about your organization and that you were the co-author founder of the vet centers, which from all my time doing interviews, the vet centers have been so incredibly helpful with mostly Vietnam vets. They help to navigate the VA system, and that you were one of the founders, a co-founder of that. So please tell us more about your organization now and what you're doing in the streets of LA.
well, to get to my organization today, that madness and energy, the fact that I was recruited because I was one of few veterans that had the experience as a mental health officer in the Vietnam War. So the West LA VA, it's called today, is the largest VA. There's 2 hospitals there in the day. In Vietnam vets, only 7% were going and using the VA. 7% of 350,000 Vietnam era veterans in LA County, they didn't use. And the only way they went there is either by police or by emergency. They wouldn't volunteer to go in. And I was brought in to assess the hospital. And that's a whole God shot, and we don't have time for that. And probably the lead psychiatrist in the world on schizophrenia was head of UCLA, NPI, and the VA. They're in bed together. And he was just trying to recruit people to change the system. And my sergeant, who was drafted out of USC graduate school, invited me to the lecture he was putting on at USC. And he went up and told him who I was, and the rest was his history. He took me to lunch the next day and asked me to evaluate the largest VA hospital. All of a sudden, I'm trying to grow hair. I'm trying to be I don't know what I'm trying to be, a hippie or something to get rid of this rage. And instead of becoming a mass murderer, I became a infused Vietnam vet that saw the bad side and knew that teenagers just instinctually are not going to be able to make this transition home. Because we fought the war there, but we were all fighting the war coming home. And you've heard horror stories, have written books about what they did to Vietnam vets coming home. Society just said it was our fault. Anything negative was put on high school graduates. And that drove me to set up a program. After 90 days under psychiatry there, I wrote this blistering review of the hospital. And Dr. May, God rest his soul, said, fix it, and gave me my own unit. It's never been done. And that unit, after 7 years, became the Vet Center program. I was called by President Carter, actually Max Cleland, a triple amputee I pushed around Venice Beach, who had just gotten out of Walter Reed. He had no legs and no arm, and then became VA secretary under Carter. There's so many God blessings for how the Vet Center program and my program today goes. There's nothing I figured out. I was just there. I directed my energy and my anger in a way for these kids. I call them kids. Not much older. I'm not much older than them. And then I got to Washington, and apparently my energy didn't turn anybody off. They needed a program that they had been trying to push through Congress. And I designed the program. I brought in Bill Mahidi, who helped co-author and calm me down because, I was called the madman in the VA, and Bill, where I rest his soul, was this tall ex-priest, and we double teamed, and it took 2 years for it to become public law 9622 in June of 79, and then all of a sudden my life changed because now I've got to recruit the first 100 vet centers, hire people from Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Alaska. When I talk about it, it sounds like fiction. But I did my best, and I gave it 7 years and got as many going as possible. But there was always a battle by Congress to take the money away, and the VA does this, because the VA was angry. They didn't like the program. We do this. No, they don't go there. Veterans don't go there. So you're always following, you're always controversial. and eventually left and started the National Veterans Foundation. And I wanted to find what is the simple rule. All these, it's like a computer with so many things. How can I just use the phone on my app, on my cell phone? I don't need all of this stuff. I just want. And the one thing is how does a veteran getting out with all this chaos, no matter we know what war, can he make a phone call and talk to a vet and say, I got you back? It's going to be a different battle, and you can talk to me. Then we're all Vietnam vets, and the transition, it didn't matter. We're all war fighters. And I set up this toll-free number. Then we had billboards, and Martin Sheen, did this commercial. Then, times were different where it ran, and they called, and the vet center started building up, and I was battling more to protect it politically because politics. And they felt like, wow, the VA kept saying, well, we can do what he's doing. We can do what he's doing. They had $100 billion program. They weren't addressing my population. And then we found out they're still not addressing the warfighters population. So I've been in the battle ever since, and it's probably the only reason I'm still going. And I'm mad for a good reason. I'm mad because people should know better and should know the price that veterans pay, even if they don't go to war. They give their life for minimum wage to go all over and do things to protect our country. I know it sounds corny, but people don't realize that. I look at 5% of the country's wealth is in a few people, and they won't let us knock on their door for help. They've never served or anything. It's just, to me, it's not right. Maybe it's because from my Jesuit training, I see everything a part of the whole. I see everybody being involved. I'm just the tip of the spear, and I'm still kind of doing that. But we still have not won this battle, and these opportunities like you're giving people with books, my book, a new book that's coming out, which talks about the journey, and it's going to blow a lot of people away because I never thought I would write about some of the heinous things our country has done to veterans to me and to all veterans, because I've never left it in 53 years. I know, it's like, it'd be a rocket science to know what abuse and look the other way and whatever you want to call it. But I finally had the opportunity to do this legacy thing out of the University of Texas, and all of a sudden, probably 10 encyclopedias are going to have to be cut down to a book to talk about how we got here, at least PTSD, the vet centers, my program, where we're going in the future, what's needed, a lot of things we're talking about here. But that's how it all started. I got baptized in Vietnam as a very naive mental health officer, one of 15 in country. And, I'm proud that I suffered. I'm appreciative. Thank you, God, that I survived. And I've been able to travel the world, be a pioneer in what today we know as PTSD with colleagues in the 70s. It's just been a battle. I'm just a different kind of warrior. But yeah. I really appreciated the fact of looking at 17, 18, 19-year-olds doing things they're trained to do that changes them morally and emotionally and physically. And I was bathed in it. And I guess the higher power said, okay, now do something about it. And I'm still working on it, 53 years. And I run into wonderful people like you, Sarah, and everybody that I've talked to that you've gathered around the world. I mean, it's amazing. Everything's amazing. It was a God shot meeting you.
Yeah,
I remember the day you came up to the office, to the National Veterans Foundation.
In fact,
our hotline is open worldwide, and calls are going on right now. So I feel good about what we're doing, but there's so many things that need to be addressed by our government, our democracy, and particularly for those that pay the ultimate price.
Yes, yes. Shad, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I just want to tell you that when I came to see you with that other veteran, it was his story that opened my eyes, that made this civilian understand more the cost of war. And to hear you just never giving up, Shad, the ripple effect of your passion to take care of veterans is mind-boggling to me. Not only the ones that you have directly helped, but all the the influence of their existence too, in how you have just been absolutely tireless all these years. And I want to just honor you here. I want to thank you here. It's even hard to even know what to say. You have done so much work. It's amazing. And I just thank you. I'm so honored to have you part of this. Thank you.
I'm blessed to find a non-veteran so empathetic and so intimate about the struggle. And I love you like family.
Oh, love you too, Shad. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.